Random House Audio presents A Journey, My Political Life, by Tony Blair. Read for you by the author.
Chapter 1. High Expectations. On the 2nd of May 1997, I walked into Downing Street as Prime Minister for the first time. I had never held office, not even as the most junior of junior ministers. It was my first and only job in government. The election night of the 1st of May had passed in a riot of celebration, exhilaration, and expectation. History was not so much being made as jumping up and down and dancing. 18 years of Conservative government had ended. Labour, New Labour, had won by a landslide. It felt as if a fresh era was beginning. As I walked through the iron gates into Downing Street, and as the crowd pressed forward in enthusiasm, I could feel the emotion like a charge. It ran not just through the crowd, but through the country. It affected everyone, making them believe all things were possible, that by the very act of election and the spirit surrounding it, the world could be changed. Everyone, except for me, that is. My predominant feeling was fear, and of a sort unlike anything I had felt before, deeper even than the fear I had felt the day I knew I was going to take over the leadership of the Labour Party. Until election night, this fear had been kept in check by the routine, rigour, and sheer physical and mental exertion of the campaign. Also, campaigning was familiar emotional as well as political territory. I had a strategy for guiding us from opposition into government. I adhered to it, and I knew that if I did so, I wouldn't fail. I had redefined the Labour Party as New Labour, a changed progressive force in British politics. I had set out an outline programme of sufficient substance to be credible, but lacking in the details that would have allowed our opponents to damn it. And I had fashioned a strong but believable attack on the government, and assembled a ferociously effective election-fighting machine. In order to instill discipline into the party and even my close team, I was the eternal warrior against complacency. I regularly spoke about how big opinion poll leads could be lost, how the Tories should never be underestimated, how we had this problem and that challenge. Since we had lost 4 elections in a row and had never won 2 consecutive full terms, I was cultivating fairly fertile ground. The party had almost come to believe that it couldn't win, no matter what it did. I thought that was complete baloney. We had lost because we were out of touch with the modern voter in the modern world. The first rule in politics is that there are no rules, at least not in the sense of inevitable defeats or inevitable victories. If you have the right policy and the right strategy, you always have a chance of winning. Without them, you can lose no matter how certain the victory seems. Pretending that it was all really on a knife edge helped motivate us and kept us in line. Though underneath I was very confident, you never know. What's more, I believed the current Prime Minister, John Major, was much better than most others thought. He had real appeal as a person. Fortunately, his party had gone off the rails, to a heavy, hard-right position, and over the seemingly interminable time I'd spent as leader of the opposition, almost 3 years, I'd learnt how to play him and his party off against each other. Major had decided on a long campaign of 3 months. It was tough, of course, but it wasn't an uncharted landscape, and it fitted a pattern. The hope was that we would trip up, I would suddenly lose my head, by some trick of fate or fortune the mood of the public would switch. It was never really going to happen. Instead, and rather more predictably, the Tories fell apart. Every time Major tried to get them on the front foot, someone in his ranks resigned, said something stupid, got caught in a scandal, and frequently all 3 at once and occasionally the same person. The election campaign was long, enervating, full of phony ups and downs, shock polls and startling happenings. But in the end, the result was obvious. The scale of the victory, however, was not clear. On the night of 1st of May, it became clear just how big. And that was when the fear started to set in. The actual day of the election had passed uneventfully. Campaigning stopped and I went to vote. I walked out of our constituency home in Trimdon Colliery, an old mining village near Sedgefield in County Durham, where I'd been MP for 14 years. I strode to the polling station with Shree and the children, the ideal family picture, while a horde of snappers took our photograph. I'd waited on election day 3 times before, in 1983, 1987 and 1992, for the defeat I thought would come. I had wondered what it would mean for me, how I would position myself for the next bout of opposition, how and whether I would ever get the chance to help steer us from the path of defeat. This time, all eyes were focused on me as I travelled the last steps of the path to victory. Anxiety displaces all other emotions. You can't settle. I tried to concentrate on choosing a cabinet and phoned Gordon Brown and Peter Mandelson, who was in charge of strategy. John Prescott came up from Hull to talk through the cabinet. I spoke incessantly to Philip Gould, our chief pollster, and party staff about the prospects of the majority, but all really to pass the time. Even then, the enormity of what was about to happen didn't really sink in. By the time we got to the count, however, held in the cavernous indoor sports centre at Newton Aycliffe, it did. The exit polls had shown we were going to win. I was going to be Prime Minister. During the course of the evening, my psyche shifted as the results came in. It had been the business of opposition that dominated our thinking. Our intellectual and rational attention was drawn to the processes of government as the day came nearer, but our emotional core was still directed at getting there. It was the only business we knew. 1 or 2 of the older hands, like Jack Cunningham and Margaret Beckett, had been very junior ministers in the Callaghan government of 1976–9, but the rest of us were going to come to power as utter novices. Even those older hands knew only a Labour government in its death throes, and the time, temper and spirit of 1997 were as far removed from that of the 1970s as Mars from Earth. On our side, we had the mood and the momentum to sustain it. We had the self-belief that the start of a new adventure often bestows on the ignorant. We had the confidence that in reaching this stage we had swept all before us. Hadn't we fought a great campaign? Wasn't government just another point on the same journey? Could it really be that different? I saw those around me thinking all this. At times I thought the same. On that night, as the probability of being Prime Minister turned to certainty, I was no longer seeing through the glass darkly, but face to face with the light, and I was scared. I was afraid because I knew this was not just another stage on the same journey. Now we would enter a new and foreign land. I was afraid because I felt instinctively that its obstacles and challenges were of an altogether different order of complexity and difficulty. I was afraid because suddenly I thought of myself no longer as the challenger, but as the owner of the responsibility, the person not explaining why things were wrong, but taking the decisions to put them right. Deep down, but fighting its way to the surface, I realized I knew nothing about how tough it really was, nothing about how government really works. Most of all, nothing about how I personally would react when the mood turned against me, as I knew it would. Down in London, the partying had begun in HQ at Millbank. At the count in my constituency, the air was of almost manic excitement. The Labour people naturally were suffused with it, but even the Tories, Lib Dems and assorted others had a sense of history. Pretty soon the scale of the victory became clear. It was a landslide. People started to relax and have a drink. I remained completely sober. I had work to do. There would be speeches to make, messages to give, comportment to maintain that needed to be consistent with the magnitude of the win. It was at this point that my emotions began to diverge from those of virtually everyone else around me. As they became more and more buoyed up with the vastness of the victory, I became more and more weighed down by the burden of responsibility that was about to fall on me. I know this sounds completely bizarre, but I even became slightly irritated with it all. Couldn't they see what a great big job it was? Did they really think a manifesto written essentially to capture a mood, and whose details were deliberately and necessarily limited,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?